Well, once more, we're delighted to be here, and I'd like to thank the LA Times and for this opportunity, and also particularly UCLA for hosting us today. We're very excited to be able to present to you some great stories, some of the work of the inspiring people that have won Rolex Awards over the years. But to start, we'd like to show you just a very short film about our awards.
Since 1976, visionary men and women from 6 continents and countless backgrounds have strived to advance human knowledge and well-being with commitment and passion. The Rolex Laureates. These 140 innovative thinkers have led inspiring projects and explored beyond known boundaries. They have saved species that were condemned and protected forgotten peoples and communities. They have preserved our past and shaped our future with ambitious ideas. 40 years later, their legacy has made the world a better place, reminding us that anyone can change everything.
Thank you. Before I pass on to our first speaker, I'd just like to say there's a couple of interesting things about that make the Rolex Awards unique. It's an open application process. Every 2 years we issue a call for applications, and we literally get thousands of proposals from all over the world, and that's why we have so many different people from all walks of life, from all over the world, who have been our award winners. I also should point out that the awards are given to individuals. They're direct grants to individuals. We don't fund organizations or groups. And they're also forward-looking. These are not achievement awards. They're support for new or ongoing projects in these areas of the environment, exploration, and applied technology. So a couple of our former award winners here are going to tell you a bit about their work. The first one is Francesco Sauro. He won an award in 2014. Francesco is Italian. He's a geologist and speleologist. He's taken part in 28 different expeditions in Asia and Latin America. He's led 19 of them in Mexico and Venezuela. He's surveyed over 80 kilometers of previously unmapped cave systems and reached a depth of 1,000 meters underground. And since 2012, he's also been a scientific consultant for the European Space Agency's training program. He helps prepare astronauts by bringing them into caves where they encounter extreme natural environments that is closest to space. And this year, Time magazine named him a new generation leader. So please welcome Francesco Sauro.
We are used to thinking that every corner of our planet is already explored, documented, and mapped. Even if you look at Mars, now we have an almost complete photographic cover of the surface, but what we really see is just the very thin skin of these planets, while their interior remain elusive. We know that on the Earth, the surface extends underground through a system of fractures and caves, making it much more complex than what we can see from the satellite. Thousands of cave entrances like this one exist on our planet, and in order to go there and explore, we can use only our bodies. There are no other technological means now able to detect and map this underground environment. And then when we finally are able to get there, thanks to speleological expeditions, we can see this kind of landscapes, which are huge chambers. This one is 1 order of magnitude bigger than any other structure built by human. But because we are creatures living here on the surface of this planet, our perception of the inner side is in some way skewed, like it is for the depth of the oceans or of the upper atmosphere. And all what we know is just thanks to the patient work of speleologists. These passionate people in the last 40 years have really increased a lot the extent of our planet. Now we know that a single cave system, like Mammoth Cave here in Kentucky, can be over 600 kilometers long. And a single cave system like Krubera-Voronia Cave, which is in Caucasus region, it's a very deep abyss, can go over 2,000 meters below the surface. And all this type of caves develops mainly in what we call karstic regions. So these are regions of the world where the water can infiltrate through cracks and dissolve soluble lithologies like limestone, gypsum, or dolostone and create this kind of underground network. These regions cover about the 20% of the continent's surface, and in the last 40 years, thanks to the work of speleologists, we have now roughly 30,000 kilometers of cave mapped around the world. But geologists have estimated that what is still missing to be explored, it's probably over 10 millions of kilometers. So it's really a dark continent, and because of its nature, we will never be able to explore it all because it's fragmented, it's hidden, it's not always accessible. It's really a new land. And I am a speleologist, and in almost 20 years of expedition and exploration around the world, I've learned one very important thing. That while exploring this underground world, reality always overcomes imagination. We can daydream about what we will find descending into an abyss, but what we will find at the end will be always much beyond our capability to imagine. And I want to give to you some examples. So in 1884, Jules Verne was publishing his book, The Journey to the Center of the Earth. And he was just thinking about the inner side of our planet as a hollow cavern lined up with giant crystals. This was just a fantasy book at that time. But more than 1 century afterwards, a group of miners in the state of Chihuahua in Mexico accidentally found this cave, which is the giant crystal cave of Nikon. When we went there to explore this cave in 2007, in an environment with crystals up to 13 meters of length, and with a temperature of 50 degrees Celsius, 120 Fahrenheit, I think we were really realizing the dream of Verne, and it was even better. So this sense of astonishment completely overwhelmed me, especially in the last expeditions that we have organized with the Association La Venta and Terra Fossa in the region of the Table Mountains called the Tepuis, between Venezuela and Brazil. This is one of the oldest landscapes that we can see on Earth. It's made of rock, the quartzite, which is 1.6 billion of years old, and it's one of the hardest and less soluble rocks of the Earth crust. So that scientists were thinking that it was impossible to have caves formed there. Instead, in 2013, after a very long search, we found the biggest cave system in this kind of rock, which is called Imawariyeuta, that means the house of the gods in the indigenous local language. And entering this cave, we were first speechless because of the dimension of these galleries. It's about 23 kilometers long. And basically, we understood that this was probably one of the oldest caves that we can explore on Earth, because water needs, in this kind of rocks, tens of millions, even hundreds of millions, to form something like this. And the caves in the Tepuis are really unique. They are completely different from any other karstic caves. As you can see, for the morphological features, like these columns, which are the product of very long weathering and erosion, but also, and mainly, because they host very peculiar formations, which are a mixture between the biological and the mineralogical world. These are resembling like spiders, but sometimes also mushrooms. They have different forms, and they are like stromatolites, but they are made by amorphous silica and opal, and they are structures built by bacterial colonies for functional reasons in the darkness that scientists have not yet completely explained. And in this cave specifically, the interaction between life underground and the mineralogical world is very strong. So strong that bacteria can completely change the colors even of lakes. Like here, this blue-violet patina is the product of organic substances, violacein, which is a product of the Jantinobacterium, a genus of bacteria. And so you can understand that it's not just an adventure to go there and explore. This is just the beginning, because the scientific outcomes that could come out from this kind of exploration could have really an impact on humanity. And the geographical exploration is just the first step, and then groups of multidisciplinary scientists have to collaborate to try to read what is in these caves. And this year, we had a lot of collaboration with different institutions around the world. I was very happy because I was also joined by Hossam Zouawi, who is here in the audience. He is a microbiologist from the University of Queensland, Australia, and he is also my fellow Rolex Laureate in 2014. And we went there with the purpose to sample for microbiology to understand the biodiversity in the cave. Hossam specifically is working on antibiotic resistance, which is one of the major threats for humanity in the future. And so we think that together, in this cave, which is absolutely pristine, have never been in contact with humans, we could find new antibiotic substances, and we can probably understand how antibiotic resistance have evolved. So this is a clear example of how a mixture of adventure, entrepreneurship, exploration, deep science is needed to expand really the human knowledge. And other than the taboos, a lot of caves exist still unexplored. A lot of caves exist not studied, thousands of them, even here in the United States, all over the world. And we have so many different types of caves, like for example, caves inside glaciers. From the Arctic to Antarctica, all the shield glaciers, continental glaciers. And these caves, for example, say to us information about the climate of the past and how it is changing now. But we have caves, for example, in desertic areas, like this one in the Atacama Desert, which is carved in salt. And these kind of caves are really important to understand how life can adapt in very, very harsh environments in the underground. Also, volcanic caves. Volcanic caves are one of the probably highest potential for exploration in the future, like lava tubes, vacated magma chambers in volcanic islands like Galapagos, Hawaii, Iceland. And these caves can say something to us about how volcanic eruption works, but also on how life is able to colonize environment that just few months before were extremely hot and absolutely hostile for life. So it's really important to go forward to explore, preserve, and understand this environment, because everyone has something to tell us about our planet. But if we go and look to other planets, like Mars, we will see that this characteristic to have a well-developed underground world is not unique of our Earth. And caves could have a very big impact, could be really important for future planetary exploration, because they represent environments which are, for example, shielded by cosmic radiations. They have much lower fluctuation of temperature, daily temperature, than the outside. So they are environments which could be used as a planetary basis. And also, this environment could host signs of ancient life or even microbial actual life. So who knows, maybe we will find lives on other planets just looking to their inner side instead of the surface. And who knows, maybe the first man that will have to go on Mars will have to join the skills of the astronauts to the one of the speleologists. One journey of exploration, two journey of exploration, parallel journey, finally joined to be one. Thank you.
Well, that was very exciting. And as we said, Francesco Saudo and Hossan Zahraoui were both won Rolex Awards the same year, and they decided to go on this expedition together to look for new bacteria, new substances that could help in science and medicine. So our next, we have another example of collaboration among two former laureates who are our next speakers. Professor Rory Wilson and Dr. Brad Norman. They met when they both won a Rolex Award in 2006. Rory is a British zoologist. He spent decades coming up with ingenious ways to track wild animals and record their behavior. He's a National Geographic explorer. He served as a lead scientific advisor to National Geographic for its critically acclaimed Great Migration series. In 2015, Rory was named one of Britain's 50 most influential conservation heroes by BBC Wildlife magazine. While Brad Norman is from Australia, he's a marine biologist, the world authority on the whale shark, which is the biggest fish in the ocean. Brad is also a leader in the increasingly important field of citizen science, which means involving public in his work in interesting ways. He's the founder of EcoOcean, an organization that has been at the cutting edge of animal conservation efforts focused on the whale shark. In 2008, he was named a National Geographic Emerging Explorer, and in 2010, a National Geographic Ocean Hero. So please welcome Rory and Brad.
Thank you.
Ooh.
Oh.
What a pleasure to be in LA.
Yeah.
Conventional wisdom has it that 66 million years ago, a giant meteor hit the planet and caused a mass extinction of dinosaurs and a whole pile of other animals. And if we were around then, and we found the odd dinosaur and we'd said, "How's it going, dinosaur?" The dinosaur, before it hit, the dinosaur would have said, "Yeah, it's all right. What's that in the sky?" And we could have done the same thing to a intergovernmental panel of dinosaurs. Says, how's it going for dinosaurs? They say, "Yeah, it's okay." If you'd asked the dinosaurs after the impact and said, "How's it going? You know, lots of dust and tsunamis and stuff," you wouldn't have got an answer, actually, because dinosaurs can't speak. Okay. Let's go forward 66 million years to today. We've got a new meteor, okay? It's actually a human meteor, okay? There are now over 7 billion people on the planet, 7.125 billion, probably more since that was said. We're producing CO2, urban sprawl, cutting down forests, planting monocultures, ocean acidification. We are impacting the planet in the most spectacular way. And as we do that, we're compromising and compressing and upsetting a lot of wildlife and a lot of natural systems. That's the human meteor, and we're all part of that. See, I calculated if you squashed all the humans together into a ball, we'd have a meteor that's sort of over 1 kilometer in diameter. That's a lot of meteor. So we've got the same problem. We can't go to wildlife and say, "How do you feel about this human meteor?" They're not going to tell you, they can't. Okay, so maybe technology has an answer. And the concept for a diary that you can put on an animal that will record everything that an animal does without the animal telling you was born of the void of animal answers to questions. The void of the fact we don't actually know what goes on in animal lives for many of them. And it was considered to tell us what animals were doing. And it's interesting because I came up with the idea and I asked lots of people. I said, "Will you help me do this? It doesn't need much money just to catalyze it." And lots of learned institutions said, no, No, that's a terrible idea. We're not doing that. And then Rolex said, yeah, we think that's a cool idea. We'll sponsor that. We'll give you a little catalytic funding. And so a really important thing happened. Firstly, Rolex catalyzed it. And secondly, I got a good team of people together. Talking about synergy and collaboration, you cannot imagine how important this is. If you want to hear good music and you put an orchestra together, then get good people playing in an orchestra together. If you need a violin player, find one. So we've got Mark the Real Q, Phil the Magnificent, whoever they all are, a great team of people. And what happens out of this? We've got a tiny tag, which we call a daily diary. Brad's got it here. Hold it up, Brad. There it is.
How small it is. See
how small it is? If you can see that, you need to cut out the breakfast vitamins. There it is in relation to a pen. We use computer-aided design to make housings and put this thing together to put it on lots of different animals. It records 400 pieces of data every second. For the whole time it's on animals. It's got accelerometers, it's got magnetometers, it's got pressure sensors, speed, you name it. And it will give us 4 principal things about the lives of animals. It'll tell us where they're going, wherever they go. It'll tell us what they're doing when they're there, wherever that is. It'll tell us the cost of that in terms of energy, and it will tell us about the environment, temperature, light, humidity, that sort of thing. And the thing about it is putting this tag on wild animals. Now, wild animals out there, there's the rare and the secretive. Leopards have an embarrassing habit of eating people's goats. Right? They're not rare and secretive because they feel guilty about the goat. There are sloths which spend their time hanging around in trees, being extremely difficult to observe, whilst people cut around the forest away around them. And there are birds like penguins and animals like penguins that have the gall to do their thing in a place where we can't possibly follow them, like 100 meters below the sea surface. And one of those animals is the whale shark. And I'll give it to Brad to tell you a bit about that.
Yeah, well, why whale sharks and what sort of captured my passion over the years, 20 years I've been working on them? Well, we're in trouble of losing them, unfortunately. They are the biggest fish on the planet. And in fact, their ancestry dates back to the Jurassic time. They've been around forever. But we as humans only first discovered them in 1828. And up until the 1980s, there've been only about 320 sightings of whale sharks around the world, anywhere. So we didn't know, not a lot about them, but we did know that they were gentle giants. They're big and they're filter feeders. They don't have big teeth like great whites, for example, but they're not dangerous to humans. But unfortunately, it's because of humans, because of overfishing and ship strike, habitat destruction, that this species has now just been listed as endangered, and it's on our watch. But understanding and learning key aspects about whale sharks is key to the long-term survival of this species. Despite being widely distributed all around the globe, they are ultimately a poorly studied species. It was through my Rolex Award back in 2006 that enabled the expansion of a global citizen science whale shark monitoring program using photo ID, but engaging the public to be participants. It used the spots on the skin of a whale shark are actually in a pattern that's unique to each individual. It's like a fingerprint, but we adapted some NASA technology. We engaged thousands of citizen scientists around the world to actually help us study these guys, and they're making a difference. We've actually now identified more than 7,000 individual whale sharks around the world using this system. And that's 7,000 animals. Sounds a lot, but it's of a diminishing population. And this has gone broad, it's gone global. It's from 50 people in 54 different countries. So it really has engaged and got the world involved. But there is so much more, unfortunately, that we need to know. But these guys, whale sharks, like the penguins, or even more so than the penguins, they're quite cryptic. They can actually, and they're very hard to study, they can actually dive down great depths, at least 2,000 metres that we know, and probably deeper. And it maybe even stay down there for months at a time. We still don't know. They swim throughout the world's oceans. But what we don't know is what's critical to them, what's critical to their survival. The daily diary is one of those instruments that can actually open a window to their world and unlock some of these mysteries to understand more about this species as a whole.
Okay, thanks, Brad. What you don't know is that while Brad was talking, he was putting his notes on mine so that I felt terrible panic. But it's okay, he's taken them off.
We've got it sorted.
So Brad came up to me and he said, Rory, you want to work on a shack? Sorry, it's a terrible imitation.
It is a bit. It is.
And
I get it all the time.
I said to him, Brad, how big is this shack? And he said, about as big as a bus. And so I thought, well, the bread's not going to work, is it? You know, like catching ducks. In fact, from the moment when Brad said, let's work on the shack, there were a lot of technical problems we had to solve. You know, you've got to pack the daily diary in a housing that's going to be waterproof down to great depths. You've got to put it so that there's no drag to the shark. You've got to find a method of streamlining it and making it pop up to the surface, and buoyancy and all these other things we had to do. Again, collaborative, really important collaborative science that finally enabled us to set up the tags on the shark. So
Yeah, but putting a tag on the world's biggest fish is a bit easier said than done. It has challenges. I mean, we had to work out. We couldn't catch these animals. They don't take a bait. They're too big to pull on the side of a boat. So we basically had to put the tags on in situ, which is, you know, interesting when the shark's the size of a bus. But we sort of got the right people on the team. It was my design of how to sort of put the tag on, but getting Rory and his engineers to sort of design the system. And we got it done, and there's me putting a tag on and Rory playing wingman in the corner just in case anything goes wrong. So we had a great situation in that way. We had some great sort of results. The tags, and they continue to, but the tags go on well. But these tags are archival. They collect data, they store it, but we actually have to retrieve it. So to get back, it could be a wonderful data set, as Rory was saying. The amount of data that we can get on these tags is amazing, but we do have to get them back. It's sort of easy-ish if the whale sharks stay close by to where we tag them. And as long as they're not too deep and, you know, that we can see them, that's me diving down to actually remove one of the tags by hand. That doesn't happen very often because we want these tags to stay on for a little while, and they can travel great distances in a very short period of time. So what we need is a long-term, we need the tags on long-term, and we had to come up with a strategy. So basically, these tags have a release mechanism. They're very low impact, and they actually come off, but they'll float to the surface. And then we've got a VHF transmitter, and then we have to actually reach, find where these tags are and go and get them. And that's Rory up the top of one of the boats trying to find them. But we've certainly had some good success, and the results have been fantastic over time. Now, one of the things is this whale sharks, or the daily diary has the ability to collect information to unveil some secrets that have the potential to be groundbreaking. Currently, we're implementing a program to sort of help minimise impact or see how whale sharks react to tourism. Even in Australia alone, there's 20,000 people swim with whale sharks every year. But what effect are we having on the sharks, and are we changing the behaviour? So some of the work that we're doing currently to understand that and maybe adapt the guidelines to minimise any impacts. At the same time, we've discovered that whale sharks are a bit about their feeding habits, previously unknown. Whale sharks are extremely active around dusk, and sometimes it might only be for 10 minutes. They are able to glean all their needs for feeding in a 10-minute period at dusk. And what was really interesting, and there's lots more that are continuing, but whale sharks have a basically a similar minimising energy, much like little birds. Little birds, some of the smallest birds, have a thing called bounding flight. They flap their wings to get up, to increase altitude, and then they glide down, and they don't have to flap their wings, so they're saving energy to get to that point. We found out that whale sharks actually beat their tail. When they go to the surface, they have to beat up in the water column. They beat their tail to get up there, but then they basically glide down and use gravity and basically halve the energy expenditure that they need while they're out there. So they can travel great distances through the ocean simply by travelling that way. Is it on there that we can get that?
No, you have to just do it there.
Oh, that's right.
In fact, with a bit of luck, you'll see a visualization of this. And this is a whale shark visualized, gliding down, and then will be bounding up in the water column. The important thing about this, however, is this isn't just invented whale shark stuff. This is a whale shark doing exactly what a whale shark did when it wore the tag. And it's doing that because the tag gives you the information to be able to pull that information out. So every tail beat, the way it banks left and right, and the depth, and the way it goes down, everything about that shack, has been taken from the whale shark itself and from the daily diary. Okay, so this is an animal writing its own history. Is this solving the effects of the human meteor? I mean, let's get back to the human meteor. It's quite cute, all this whale shark stuff. People need to understand about the plight of animals. People need to understand the stories, and people need to be engaged. So how do we engage them?
Well, innovative technology, the daily diaries, and innovative community education strategies, and with the whale shark as an example, can really can achieve long-term conservation benefits. That's what we're here for, to try and help this, in this particular case, this endangered species. But there's an example of some kids that I was training or teaching in Australia, and the excitement on their faces when they're actually learning a little bit more about the program that we're working on. And basically, this is a situation where the kids are following whale sharks tagged in Australia, and we just recorded point A and B and C and put lines between them of where they've been travelling. But the research has enabled a greater understanding of the species that will ultimately aid with their conservation efforts over time. And it's exciting information that basically engages the general public. You know, especially when they get to see or get a hands-on experience on learning more about our environment and the species that it supports. But that's just a point-to-point information that kids and the general public are getting excited about. The data we get from the daily diary has so much more to offer.
Put that on. We've heard today about the Jungle Book, and we've heard today about technology and software and CGI and all sorts of clever stuff, and people with a story to tell, and then using the technology to tell that story. Okay, and that story has come from our own minds. But what if the story was told by the animals themselves? What if the animals were the directors of the show, and what if the show was their life, seen by everybody on the planet? So what if we took the daily diary visualization data, okay, from all the animals being equipped with daily diaries, and we turned it into virtual reality, and we made them swim and fly and walk through Google Earth. And then we let people on the web follow them. Whale sharks. You could follow a whale shark a mile underwater, or a badger in the deeps of its burrow, or condors in the Andes. And you could fly around them. You could put yourself near or far and be impressed or less impressed. Let me give you can you click that, Brad? Let me give you an idea of the sort of things we could do. This is a film taken off the back of a wandering albatross as it just flies around. And it's good that you're seeing this before lunch, because this is the craziest stuff that goes on. And this is normal for a wandering albatross. This crazy banking, see the head popping up? The point about it is using daily diary information, taking technology and placing it in a Google Earth context, we could have people just click on stuff and say, well, what's my elephant doing today? Or what's my lion doing today? Effectively, we could see animal lives and we could understand the problems they encounter. We could garner an opinion on how animals are. And if you're following the fox or the raccoon, you say, wow, I never thought it was going to spend half an hour crossing the road. You know, if you're a raccoon, you understand that really well. The point about it is we've taken it to this stage with the daily diary, and we've taken it to the stage where we can virtually realize it. Now we need to make it real for people. And the idea is if we can enthuse people, if we can motivate people, maybe, just maybe, because people will understand how this type of stuff is changing animal lives, we can change the trajectory of the human meteor. Thanks very much.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Based in his country of Cameroon. He's among a new generation of African innovators who are determined to build high-tech business ventures while at the same time helping their fellow citizens. In 2014, Forbes hailed him as an example of African innovation at its finest. So please welcome Arthur Zhang to talk about his project.
I love action movies, especially when a car passes through a big fire to crash against a building. And when I see that, I say, this is beautiful. It can also be dangerous, of course, for the driver and for those who are inside the car. But for people like me who are just watching, we don't really care about the danger and we just enjoy the moment. But when we pay more attention, most of the time in movies, when a car accident happens, the medical staff will try to save the person by connecting him or her to a big machine which plots strange covers that only the doctor knows the meaning of. And this machine is called an ECG machine, and it monitors the heart activity of the patient in real time. A few years ago, I was a computer science student in Cameroon, and some of my courses were very boring. And every time I was watching this device on TV, I was asking myself, but what is it and how does it work? And can I develop a software that can do the same thing? And then one day I decided to do it. I decided to develop a software that can perform the same tasks than an ECG machine. But to do that, I needed to know what was behind the machine in terms of knowledge. So I decided to do an internship inside the General Hospital of Yaoundé. And the first thing that I will learn from my internship is that it is very, very hard to find a cardiologist. Especially in my country, for example, we just have about 60 cardiologists for more than 22 million people. And all of them only work inside the major hospital located in town. And this is a problem because 70% of the population in Cameroon live in village, and we estimate that we have about 900,000 people who suffer from cardiovascular disease and hypertension. That means this person have to perform heart checkup every time. So they need to go to the city to reach their cardiologist, which is very expensive for them, longer, and it is also very risky because car accidents are very frequent in Cameroon. So 5 years ago, I decided to solve this problem, and then I invented a machine that is called the cardiopad, which is a medical device that is used to perform heart examination, which can be diagnosed remotely. So it is the integration because a certified ECG machine and a cell phone. and we use it to perform heart examination and transfer the data to a remote cardiologist who can then realize his diagnosis. And it works very simply. So I will show you what is a cardiopath. So inside the cardiopath, you have a set of elements. You have the main component, which is a tablet. And this tablet is used to perform the heart examination. And to do that, when the patient needs to perform a heart examination first, he will go to the hospital of his village. And using this device, we will perform a heart examination on the patient by connecting him, by attaching some electrodes on the skin of the patient. And then the data will be recorded inside a tablet that will send the data to the cloud. And the data of the patient will be also sent from the cloud to the tablet or the smartphone of a cardiologist. So the cardiologist will receive the readings of the patient, produce his diagnosis using a computer-assisted mobile application, and he will transfer his diagnosis and his medical instruction to the nurse who performs the examination on the patient. So it will help the patient to stay in his village. He will save time, he will save money, and he will avoid car accident. So, thank you very much. So I've spent about 5 years to develop this technology, and it was not easy because I faced many challenges. The first challenge that I faced to develop the device is about the knowledge, because I'm basically a computer science engineer. So to develop this kind of project, it was not easy because I needed to learn electronics. So, but fortunately, using a free e-learning program provided by the Indian Institute of Technology, I was able to learn the electronic online using a set of online video courses. So I successfully learned the embedded system and digital electronics. So I was able to design the first prototype of a cardiopath on the electronic ends. And the second challenge was the money, because at this time I was just a researcher in my country, so my job was not very formal and I had no revenue. So, but fortunately, my mother, who is a nurse, believed in my project, and then she took a loan for me. So I get $1,000 US, and then using this money, I was able to order the different electronic component that I needed to do the assembly of the first prototype. So I've finished the assembly, and then I deployed the small operating system and programs that I developed previously, and then I got the first prototype that you have here, which is the first experimental sample of the device. Then after finishing the prototype, I needed more money to produce the first device that would be used by hospital. So I decided to found a company called Highmore Medical with my friend, and then we submitted the project for the Rolex Awards for Enterprise in 2014, and then we won in the category of applied technology. And this gave us some money that helped us to fund the company, to produce the first devices used by the hospital, and also to improve the device, because it was very useful to continue to develop the device, adding functions. So now you have the cardiopath, and this is the first team of the company. Now the cardiopath has been adopted by the medical community in Africa, and we recently received thank you. And recently we received a medical certification from our country, the Cameroon, that will help us to sell the cardiopath everywhere in Africa. So we have already some customers like Médecins Sans Frontières, which is an NGO, a very important NGO in the medical fields. We also have many customers in Nepal, in Kenya, and in Comoros. So actually we are working to increase the scale of the project. We have sold about 67 devices actually, and with that money we run the company. We have already also created another company which produces RFID cards to identify each of our patients. So actually, our company has 13 employees. We design, develop, and we assemble medical electronic devices, and we hope that we will continue to develop technological solutions that will help to improve life and healthcare in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you, Arthur. We should. This was actually the first medical tablet ever invented in Africa, and it's a beautiful device. And so please take advantage of the break to talk to Arthur, and he can show it to you. And it's kind of an example of, for the UCLA students who are here, what you could do if you get bored during your classes. So the final Rolex Laureate who's going to speak today is Piyush Tiwari, who won an award in 2010. He's one of the leading change agents in public policy in India. He created the Save Life Foundation, which is a nonprofit organization committed to improving road safety and particularly emergency medical care to road accident victims across India. He's also now an Equine Green Fellow and an Ashoka Fellow, and his work has been featured prominently in Time magazine and earlier this year in the New York Times. So Piyush, please welcome Piyush Tiwari.
Take a moment and think about your family, what they mean to you, and what you would do for them. I'm from India, and when I was 12 years old, I saw my family slide into a deep financial crisis. My father's business had crashed, and we had to give up everything, our home, and every little comfort that we all take for granted, like having a fridge or a table at home. But my parents never compromised with the education of their children, even if that meant taking loans to put us through school. It brought me even closer to them and made me deeply empathetic towards those who were not as privileged as we once used to be. Seeing my parents rebuild their lives from scratch taught me to overcome my fear of failure. And I worked hard to do well in school and in college. As the eldest of the 3 children at home, it was important for me to start working as soon as I could, so I could contribute to the family income. So when I got my first job, it meant the world to me. For the first several years, I did not make enough money to contribute in a decent way, but I got mentorship and support that took me from strength to strength. I did well in my career, and at the age of 28, I became the managing director of the India operations of an LA-based private equity fund. And my then boss, I think Madhu Vijayan, is somewhere here in the audience today. Soon, I was able to buy a home for my family, our first own home in 16 years since we had lost our previous home, and things had begun to look better. It was 5th April 2007, and I was on my way back from work when I got a call from my dad. And on the phone, he told me that my cousin brother Shivam had met with an accident. You see, for me, Shivam was more than a cousin. His family was going through a similar crisis as we had. And in this feisty, full of life 16-year-old, I saw myself. I was a mentor to him, and to me, he was like a son. So I started rushing home, and even as I was doing that, I got another call from my dad. And he told me that Shivam had passed away. I felt the world come crashing down on me at that point of time. The next day, after cremation, I went to the site of the accident and tried to understand what had really happened. I started talking to people. What I learned absolutely horrified me. I learned that after being hit by a car, he was able to drag himself to the side of the road, and he asked people for help. This was 3:30 in the afternoon. A number of people stopped by, but nobody actually came forward to help him. And he bled to death on the side of the road. I couldn't understand why no one would come forward to help another person who's in distress. Why did no one even call the police? We all know what being helpless feels like, and I felt helpless at that point of time. To answer these questions, I took some time off from work, and I traveled across the country. I met with doctors, lawyers, police officers, and other affected families to understand what was really going on. And I discovered three things. I discovered that in the past 10 years, over 1 million people had been killed in road crashes in India. That the circumstances faced by my cousin were not isolated, and that thousands suffered the same fate by the side of the road given the lack of ambulance services in our country. And the third thing I learned was that bystanders were hesitant to help, not because of apathy, but because of the profound fear that they had of the legal and police system that existed in India at that point of time. In the past, many who had attempted to help those who were injured were subjected to legal hassles lasting a couple of decades at times. In many cases, Good Samaritans had been accused of perpetrating the accident itself by the police. But it didn't have to be that way. My cousin would have lived had passers-by come to his aid. That is when I decided to do something about it, and I established the Save Life Foundation. We started by engaging with the police, not only because it was the police that people were afraid of, but also because, given the lack of ambulances, it was the police that in many cases took the injured to the hospital. Save Life till date has trained and connected through a mobile application over 10,000 responders to come to the aid of injured people. But my aim was to change the framework around how Good Samaritans were treated in India. And in doing that, enable a lot more people to come forward and help those who were injured. This required me to work full-time with the foundation, give up my job, even though my corporate salary at that time was funding a large part of the foundation's operations, including the police training program that we had been running. That is when I received the Rolex Award for Enterprise. And that enabled me to take that risk, which I was so hesitant to take given my background, where I was coming from. The credibility that the award built got us a lot more support, including from Michael Bloomberg out of New York and Red Cross out of Geneva. I built a team, and I created a nationwide campaign around protection of Good Samaritans. I advocated with policymakers. I engaged extensively with the media, got public on the streets, and filed a public interest petition in the Supreme Court of India invoking our right to life and the fact that people who come to the aid of injured to save somebody need to be insulated. In a period of 2 years, hundreds of questions were asked in the Indian Parliament. 2 private member bills were introduced. Major TV shows in India started talking about the issue. And the government too, finally, began to acknowledge that something ought to be done. A few months ago, on 30th March 2016, India got its Good Samaritan law. Today, people who choose to help those in distress are completely insulated from any kind of legal or procedural hassles. we can now train hundreds of thousands of people in basic trauma care skills and know now that they will also have the confidence to use these skills, which they earlier did not. According to the Law Commission of India, this will save 1 in 2 lives lost on Indian roads. That's 500,000 lives over the next decade. Once, of course, this is effectively implemented, which is our next big challenge. If you want to know how you can track us and how we are doing, here are some ways that you can do so. But I'm sure everybody in the audience today has at least one issue that you're passionate about, that you feel for. I urge you not to suppress that feeling, to do something about it, to change the framework in which that issue is looked at. Today, more than ever before in our history, we need a lot more problem solvers in our societies. And I know that there are at least 400 of them in this room today. Thank you.